Good leadership rarely begins with a grand vision. It often begins with a simple question. How can my actions help others flourish? Welcome to the Listening Heart, folks. At its core, leadership integrates how we think, act, and live across business, work, and life. And from a scriptural and values-driven perspective, spiritual leadership is the practice of leading from within, guided by wisdom, faith, values, and a higher purpose. On Wednesdays, our discussions turn to coaching talks, which focuses on performance leadership in the traditional workplace. And on Fridays, we turn our attention to adaptive leadership in the digital world. I'm Richard Fontanie, and I will be your host today. If you are new to this podcast, welcome. And if you are returning, a heartfelt welcome back. Now, what gives me the right to talk about these things? It really follows my life experiences. From 6 years in a seminary under the guidance of Benedictine monks, to 18 years in government at the executive level, to owning my own consulting and training firm for over 45 years, and finally, to transitioning my work into the digital world over the past several years. Today, we'll explore working for the common good, going beyond personal success. And we'll discover what that means in the concrete world. Now, this topic matters because we live in a culture that often measures success by personal achievement, status, influence, and financial gain. Now, these things are not necessarily wrong, but the challenge comes when success becomes centered entirely on ourselves. And spiritual leadership invites us to consider a whole different type of question. What if our success is meant to benefit others? Or what if leadership is less about personal advancement and more about contributing to something larger than ourselves? Now, the idea of the common good runs throughout the whole of Scripture. In the Old Testament, the prophet Jeremiah encouraged the people living in exile to seek the welfare of the city where they lived. In Jeremiah chapter 29, Jeremiah reminds us that when the community prospers, individuals benefit as well. In the New Testament, Apostle Paul repeatedly encouraged believers to look beyond their own interests. For example, in Philippians chapter 2, he wrote, "Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others." And Jesus demonstrated this principle throughout his ministry. He consistently placed service above status. He healed, taught, encouraged, forgave, and challenged people to love their neighbors. His leadership was never self-centered. It was always other-centered. You know, the common good is not merely a scriptural concept. It is also a universal value. Across cultures, organizations, and communities, people recognize that healthy societies depend upon cooperation, responsibility, respect, compassion, and contribution. When individuals focus only on themselves, trust declines. However, when people work toward shared goals, communities become stronger. Now let's explore several practical lessons we can glean from today's topic. The first lesson is that true leadership expands our perspective. Now, many of us naturally focus on our own goals. We think about our responsibilities, our deadlines, our challenges, and our ambitions. Spiritual leadership from a Christian perspective, however, encourages us to widen our lens. We begin asking how our decisions affect others. We consider the impact on families, colleagues, customers, communities, and future generations. For instance, a business owner may ask how a decision affects employees. A parent may ask how a decision shapes a child's character. A community volunteer may ask how an initiative serves those who are struggling. Leadership for the common good begins when we intentionally broaden our perspective. The second lesson teaches that service creates influence. Now, many people pursue influence first and service second. And Jesus reversed that order. In Mark chapter 10, we are reminded that the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. Now, this principle remains powerful today as it did then. People are more likely to trust those who demonstrate genuine concern for others. Why? Because service builds credibility, relationships, and trust. Service often becomes the foundation of lasting influence. For instance, in the workplace, employees notice leaders who invest in their growth. In families, children notice parents who are present and attentive. In communities, people notice those who consistently contribute without seeking recognition. The third lesson is that collaboration creates greater outcomes than competition alone. Now, competition does have its place. In 1 Corinthians, St. Paul uses a sports analogy, running, to highlight the value of competition. But he uses it to encourage Christians to run for Christ, which is not Jesus' last name, as Richard Rohr points out, but who is the Logos existing from the beginning of time, as described by John in the opening of his gospel. To be sure, competition can foster innovation and excellence. However, spiritual leadership recognizes that collaboration often yields deeper and more sustainable results. Think about a successful team. Each member brings unique strengths, and when individuals work together toward a shared purpose, the collective result often exceeds what any person could accomplish alone. And this has spiritual significance when we listen to our hearts and really think deeply about it. In essence, the common good requires cooperation, listening, humility, and a willingness to learn from others. And those qualities strengthen our relationships, improve our actions, and develop our spiritual life. The fourth lesson is that integrity protects the common good. Now, integrity means doing what is right even when no one is watching. It means aligning our actions with our values. And experience tells us that trust grows when people consistently act with honesty and accountability. Without integrity, organizations struggle, relationships weaken, and communities lose confidence. Or with integrity, people create environments where cooperation can thrive. Now, here's a story about a government executive who often reminded his management team that every decision either builds or erodes trust. And that simple observation shaped countless decisions. And over time, the organization developed a stronger culture because its leaders consistently considered the broader impact of their actions. Now, the fifth lesson is that contribution creates meaning. Many people spend years pursuing success only to discover that achievement alone does not provide lasting fulfillment. So what does? Well, meaning has a way of raising its head. It often emerges when we contribute to something beyond ourselves. And this is where grace shines through us. We see it in volunteers who dedicate their time to community programs. We see it in teachers who invest in students. We see it in entrepreneurs who relate to others with respect. And we see it in parents and grandparents who nurture future generations. And what do all these situations teach us? Well, simply this. Contribution connects personal success with collective benefit. And that connection often becomes a source of deep purpose. Let me share a simple story. Several years ago, an owner of a company faced a difficult decision. His company had an opportunity to increase profits by reducing support for employees' development programs. The financial argument appeared convincing. Yet, he paused and asked a different question. What would this decision mean for the long-term well-being of employees, customers, and the organization as a whole? And after careful reflection, he chose to continue investing in people. And that decision reduced short-term gains, but produced long-term results. Employee engagement improved, customer satisfaction increased, turnover decreased, and the organization ultimately became stronger. By considering the common good, this person created benefits that extended far beyond immediate profits. Now, the same principle applies in everyday life. Small actions often create significant impact. Leadership for the common good is not reserved for executives, political leaders, or public figures. It belongs to all of us. For instance, a neighbor who helps another neighbor, a colleague who mentors a new employee, a family member who chooses patience during a difficult conversation. And all of these present opportunities every day to positively influence others. Now, as we reflect on today's topic, let's consider a few questions. Where have you or I primarily focused on personal success? How might our decisions affect the people around us? What opportunities exist to contribute more intentionally to our workplace, family, business, or community? What would it look like to lead with service integrity, and collaboration? Now, these questions are not easy to answer, yet they are very, very important. Spiritual leadership invites us to reflect and grow. It calls us to align our actions with our deepest values. It encourages us to recognize that leadership is ultimately about service. Now, we have been entrusted with a tremendous amount of gifts, a tremendous amount of opportunities, and relationships, and influence. The question is how we choose to use them. And we can choose to use them wisely, generously, and for the benefit of others. So what will we choose? And that is the big question. Hopefully, we choose to contribute to others, because lasting success is often measured not by what we accumulate, by what we contribute. Now take a moment this week to reflect, pray, and align with your heart. If this conversation resonated with you, please subscribe, like, and refer to a friend. And thank you for doing so. Oh, and there's one more thing, and that is the learning lesson. This is a new thing that asks, what did we learn from today's conversation? And here are 4 possible things to tuck away in your listening heart. Today's key insights: perhaps as leadership reaches its highest expression when personal success is connected to serving the common good. What seemed to work well today? In short, we explored both scriptural wisdom and universal values, while connecting them to practical applications in business, work, and life. And here is something further to consider. Reflect on whether your current definition of success includes the well-being of others. And what is today's takeaway? Well, I leave that up to you to think about and to listen to what your heart is telling you. I'm Richard Fontanie, signing off. Join me next week when we explore another topic for the listening heart: spiritual discernment in daily life. I hope you can join me. Bye for now.